Welcome to Cut the Fluff, a space where we drop the small talk, peel back the curtains, and truly delve into what it is that makes us tick and what's keeping us up at night. You can expect honest, raw, and very vulnerable conversations.
What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life. Deep connection lights a spark. It's like you know me in the depths of my heart. We're dreamers.
Welcome to another episode of Cut the Fluff. In today's episode, Anika and I will be discussing the difference between good old gossip and curiosity, particularly when you're looking at making new friends and just wanting to, conduct a bit of a background check on a certain individual. We also discuss the false illusion that your partner can be absolutely everything to you. That's your hiking buddy, your yoga buddy, your tarot card buddy, your cook, your psychologist, etc. And how important it is to have an identity outside of your relationship. We hope you find today's episode useful, and as always, if you enjoy it, hit the subscribe button and share it with a friend that you think might find it useful.
Welcome back to episode number 9. I think maybe we're officially into season 2.
Yeah. I feel we end here and then move into season 2 after this one. So it better be a bloody banger and keep people hanging on.
Woo-hoo. All right. So I think I want to open this one with a question that has been on my mind the last couple days concerning the idea of the fine line between gossiping, which I sort of interpret as talking about people behind their back, getting into their business, and generally a bit gross, versus like a natural curiosity to understand people and their behavior and just kind of get what people's story is. And so I guess in a sense talking about people behind their back to other people, but only in a way that is trying to understand them a bit more versus like gossiping and bitching and saying bad things behind their back. But I think the line is really blurred, and I'm a bit confused about when does it cross over from you're just being curious and you're just trying to understand your new surroundings or a whole new social scene, and then it steps into like gross territory of like gossiper and we're back at high school. What do you think?
Oh, it's a tough one. And as you said, I do feel it's a bit of a blurred line, but for me personally, when I am asking about others, it's normally coming from a space of curiosity, very similar to yourself. And I think it's almost like, you know, when you have a resume
Yes.
and you're just checking references, like in a
little background check.
Yeah, a little background check, because I think I've spent so much of my time just sifting through like, you know, particular friendship groups or, you know, people that you want to either collaborate with or whichever platonic or in a kind of romantic sense, you want a bit of a resume. And it's not from what is she doing and gossiping about their life. It's more so, hey, I'm going to start investing my energy into this individual. Are there any red flags that you've kind of sensed that maybe I haven't picked up on? And then that kind of fills in a more informed choice around whether to proceed with that friendship or the relationship or whatever it may be. Because I think word of mouth at the end of the day is still the greatest source of information. And yeah, I think when you come from it from that perspective, I perceive it. I don't indulge in the whole, what is she up to? Has she cheated? Blah, 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 you know, and perpetuating that kind of talk about negativity. But I think there's merit in doing a background check and just coming from a place of curiosity.
Yeah, totally. It's a little bit like a Yelp review. Before you go to a restaurant, you're totally going to check out what people think. Yeah. And I like this phrase. I think I never know who said the phrases. You're the one that always follows up with like, so-and-so said this, but talk about ideas, not people. And I've always sort of had that in the back of my mind of like, yes, when you're coming into a conversation or an interaction. I want it to be about like talking about stuff you can control and stuff that is more empowering and uplifting and creative than that gossipy minutia of like, oh, she's sleeping with this person and oh my God, they're cheating on each other and da 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 da.
It makes you second guess, like when you're in that environment with someone who's like that, you're like, if you're talking about them like that, what the hell are you saying about me? And that's what always comes to my mind. I'm like, that's not the type of people that I want to be relaying information to, opening up to, because at the end of the day, if you're talking to me about it in this manner, who the hell are you? What are you saying about me?
Totally. I think that's the narrative going through all of our heads when someone goes, hey, don't tell anyone this, but, and there's just like a natural, it's alluring, right? When someone says that to you, like, when, I'm like, yes, I'm not going to tell a soul. I love a secret. I think as humans, we just naturally love a thriller and a like, ooh, go on. So there's that on the one side, but the other side, you're like, fuck, are you telling people my secrets? And like, can I really confide in you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a great area, but I don't know what's in the back of your mind when if you're ever like, Annie, don't tell anyone this, but what's going through your mind? Because you probably are also filtering for like, Annika's probably thinking, can she trust me with her information? Because there are those times when
it needs to be a bit of give and take, doesn't it? Like in order to keep the relationship balanced of like providing information and also disclosing information.
Well,
like,
yeah, and that's part of like the vulnerability game too. Like, I'll show you a piece of me if you show me a piece of you. It builds that connection. So I think it has to come from a place of authenticity and just knowing when maybe if it's harming someone else that's not in the room. And I think maybe it's mum that's given me that advice. Like if that person, could you say that to that person if they were in the room? If they overheard the conversation, would you be okay with that? And would they be okay with that? I think that's a good place to come from too when you are talking about other people that aren't there. It's like, yeah, would I be okay saying this in front of them?
Yep.
And would they be okay with that?
Is this coming from a genuine place of like concern about the other individual and wanting to disclose this so that when you have future interactions with them, maybe you can have that in the back of your mind, for example, that they're going through this. So if they do, behave in a certain way or whatever it is, it just kind of, you're informed. And I do agree with that. It's an interesting space. And I do agree with that factor of would I be comfortable of saying this to the person's face? And if it was to be disclosed, would I be okay with standing and being like, hey, you know what? I did disclose that about you, but I did it for these reasons.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, that is you describing your experience. And so if you were like, this was the situation, this is what happened, like no one can argue with your experience of what happened. That happened to you. And through your lens, that was very true for you. And so I think that can't be disputed versus like putting opinions and thoughts in other people's, like misconstruing where they were coming from. All you can do is say, this thing happened, I'm weirded out by it, what does it mean, what's your experience been of this, and invite a conversation versus like just throwing someone under the bus.
Yeah, and talking about like, this is how I'm feeling, this is the way I perceived it. It's not necessarily the way that things actually panned out, because realistically we're all looking through, taking in this world through different lenses. But it's the truth for you, but it might not actually be what the other person was intending. So I think there's talking about how you experienced it is often also a good way to go about it.
I think so. And maybe this spills over into like more intimate relationships, because like we live in a world with people and we are in relationship with people. And so we can't not talk about people. Mm-hmm. We can't not talk about what our interactions and experiences have been. And so like with intimate relationships, that's always been a helpful tip Joao and I have taken on, of like, it is totally your call to flag something and say, when this happened, when we went to that dinner party and you said X, that made me feel blah, 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 blah. And the other person is not allowed to go, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. It didn't make you feel like that. That didn't happen. Because the minute you say that didn't happen and you negate it, it automatically creates a block, right? Like, you don't know what happened in my head for me.
Yeah. And it gets the other person to shut off. It's almost considered gaslighting once you do, what's the word? You don't recognize, or you kind of shut down another person's experience. They would classify that as gaslighting as well.
Yeah. So anyway, glad we unpacked that. Obviously, it's top of mind for me because I am wrestling with that. And we've talked about my experience moving to Byron and forming new adult relationships and just naturally being curious about where people are at and what they're about, but not wanting that to cross over into that person that, talks behind your back.
Is a gossip queen. Yeah.
Not
I would really like to unpack this whole communication with the partner aspect. And I think one thing that's been front of mind for me personally is this idea that I feel like we're fooling ourselves into believing that that person, the person you've chosen to be in a relationship with, if you are in a relationship, that they are meant to tick every single box and be everything to you. The psychologist, the hiking buddy, the yoga buddy, the meditation buddy, whatever it is that you've kind of chosen. But I feel like we're fooling ourselves into believing that that is actually the way that it's meant to be. And what are your thoughts around that? Do you feel that partners should play a particular role and that should be determined and it should be spoken about clearly around what expectations are? Or do you believe we're kind of fooling ourselves into believing that they should be ticking every single box and, be the psychologist, the hiking buddy, the cook?
Oh, look, I think we're all delusional about the roles, the multiple roles our partner is supposed to play, and especially the last 18 months when we've been cooped up together and wanting them to be all of those things. It's so unfair. And even to have that placed on you that you have to be a million different things for your partner, it's really overwhelming. So in my head, in theory, I'm like, no, they should just be your lover and I want my lover to be my best friend, and the day that they're not, then that's going to be another conversation. But that has to be there for me. But yeah, Shual's just not going to come and do yoga with me, and he's not going to sit there and do tarot cards, and he's not he fooled me at the start of our relationship that he was all those things. But I actually have come to terms with the idea that there are special roles that your friends and even just colleagues and strangers should play. I think it's healthy. And trying to absolve him of having to be all those things. But I do hold him to an impeccable, I'm a bit of a bitch about our standard for communication, and how you're showing up in the relationship is really important. And if you cross that line and aren't we always say in our relationship, you take care of you for me and I'll take care of me for you.
Oh, I love that.
I think it was Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh, that said that to Piglet. And I was like, yes, that's what I want my relationship to be like. I will take fucking good care of me and my mental health, and I will make sure I fill my cup with my girlfriends and what lights me up, and then I can come to the relationship full for you. And I totally expect you to do that for me. And when you're not, I will have a lot to say about it.
I will let you know. I will be very vocal about it. I was laughing about the tarot because Amit, in the nicest way possible, he's like, babe, I'm just not into that hippy dippy stuff. You do you, boo. But I don't need to be part of that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. You don't need to be part of that. And I just outsourcing aspects. You're my hippy dippy buddy.
I'm that girl. I'm here for you for that.
And just, yeah, learning to outsource aspects of a wholesome relationship, being okay with the fact that that one person isn't going to tick absolutely every single box like the fairy tales have sold us. And I think a lot of us get caught up in that false narrative very quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to reference a friend, and already my mind is like, is that gossip or is that natural curiosity? And I'm going to categorize it as natural curiosity without naming her, because I think it showcases that other people feel this too. And we were talking about this the other day, that in the past she's had a frustration that her partner hasn't been all those things like what we described, and then letting go of the expectation of like, hey, he's just not as social as I am. Like, I love going to a barbecue on the weekend with 50 people and like working the crowd, and I get really energized by that. He, on the other hand, would like rather take a nap and maybe like stay at home and watch the kids. And she's like, I used to feel a bit, upset about that we should show up as, I think maybe as like a partnership, and like we should want the same things. But now she's like, totally come to terms with it. That's just not how he gets his energy. And we're a better couple for it if, like, yeah, he goes and does him, I'll go do me, and then we'll come together and have a great time when we are together.
Yeah. And honoring each other's way that you operate, because Armin and I are very much, I'm the extrovert, he's the introvert, and we do operate and recharge in different ways. And I've had to honor that. I'm also a very social being. So very early on in our relationship, I'd be going for breakfast with my family every week, and I'd be dragging him along until I kind of took it personally. I was like, why don't you want to, why am I sensing a bit of resistance, thank you, in this area? And why when I go out, for example, on a weekend for a stroll to the markets, I'm a dawdler. I love taking in things, and slowing down, whereas he's kind of on a time schedule. And this resistance, it was kind of building up, and I was like, what is it? And he's like, Danny, you need to realize, and another thing, actually, this is worth indicating, is that he works 9 to 5, and I work, majority of my time is spent alone at home, and I work, remotely, or I'm on a modeling job. And so he's spent all of his time around people. And then by the time he gets home, I'm just like, because I haven't spoken to anyone. And so there's that dynamic playing out. And so when weekends do come around, he views them as like the opportunity to recharge. And so that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't recharge through the same ways of, going and seeing family and going to the market and dawdling and watching, the street busker. I remember I was watching the street busker one time. He's like, come on, let's go. I'm like, why are you rushing me? Why? But I think, just noticing that we are fueled by very different things, and that dynamic of even our work life balance and how that plays out is a little different between us too. So we've had to navigate that by ensuring that we do have spaces which we commit to, such as date nights. We used to have this thing called Anything Can Happen Tuesday, which was really fun.
I remember you telling me that. Tell the audience what that is.
So Anything Can Happen Tuesday was every fortnight. Ahmed and I would take turns, and we would have a budget. I think our budget was $50 back in the day, $50. And you ultimately plan a date night or activity, and the other person doesn't find out what the activity is until they actually show up. So we did painting, salsa dancing. We did what are they called? The trap rooms, where you have to figure out
escape rooms.
We did that. We had a picnic in the park with some really nice dinner, like just little things. And it was really exciting from the perspective of, one, you never knew what you were in for as the person that wasn't planning it that week. And we were committing time to the relationship and to ourselves. And I think that's really, really important to keep that going.
Well, yeah, because I was going to ask, so it's cool if you acknowledge that you both get your energy from different arenas,
Yep.
But then what is the common space where is there a little give and take? Like if you don't want to be out there socializing and talking, but your partner like craves that, where's the midpoint where you can meet in the middle and go, this is our shared space and I'm going to do that thing that I wouldn't naturally choose to do, but because I love you and I want to invest in the relationship, I'm going to do it. So what do you think the middle ground is?
I think the middle ground is our values and where they truly align. And I think being very vocal about, and I'm going to use the terminology of the tickets again, but this means a lot to me, ticket, of like, hey, Army, I really value my family and I really value time with my family. And I understand you won't be there at every Saturday or Sunday, but I would really like you to, and it's compromise as well. I'd really like you to be there, you know, once a month. Is that okay with you? Because I really want to foster that relationship as a whole. And it just kind of providing them with insight of why it's so important to you as well, and having those open discussions around, okay, so I understand that for example, Amit is DJing at nightclubs and sometimes they run really early into the morning, like 3 a.m. sometimes his set time. So we even have to navigate that. I'm not someone that necessarily likes to stay up that late. So I'll be like, okay, I'll come to this one because I really want to support you. I want to be there for you. But this is kind of my cutoff. And, you know, I'll either, let's say, drive there and then leave as soon as the set's done or whatever it is. But just communicating around, hey, this is really important for me. I'd really like you to be there. And then running from that space. Does that provide a...
Yeah, that sounds very adult and like...
Are you able to provide an insight into Joelle and you? And like when you don't necessarily agree on something, how you work through a very similar scenario? Like, are you both fueled by the same things, or do you have a bit of space where you've noticed that you're fueled by different things, and how you go about ensuring that the connection remains, you know, there's alive? And for anyone that said that it doesn't require work, I think
fucking liars.
They're bloody liars. I don't know. Reach out to me.
Share your secrets.
Yeah.
The thing about us is that we came together over a shared interest in meditation. So we met randomly in a nondescript town in Arizona. It's called Carefree, at a meditation retreat. I like to say I manifested. He popped out of thin air, and I wasn't looking for him and he wasn't looking for me, which I think is the best space to meet someone, because, you know, you don't have any of that neediness energy, which I had sort of had over the last 3 years before that in New York. There's like a desperation to meet a man, and the odds are not in your favor if you're a woman wanting to date a man. It's like for every young hot male there's like 10 hot beautiful women banging on the door. So
wow.
But anyway, we digress. But so I met Joelle on the back of like, fuck that energy in New York, I'm going back to Australia, I'm going to meet a nice man there, but I'm going to be chill about it, and like blah. And I was just doing this meditation retreat for me. Yeah, it's true what they say. The minute you let go of like needing something, it comes to you. Anyway, so we met in that shared space of like really being quite intrigued by the mystical and, you know, the world of the quantum field. And so I just found that really hot. I was like, we nerded out when we met, and we were like, oh my God, and this about the fifth dimension, and like this about manifesting. And it was really refreshing to meet a grown-ass man who could like have that level of conversation, was into it. And so I think he did too. We thought that, no, actually, I think he thought he was going to get in my pants, but I thought, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm such a nerd. Like, we can continue this. Maybe we'll work together. And so it definitely wasn't love at first sight, but it was like a meeting of the minds. So anyway, cut to like 5 years later, 2 kids and engaged and not married. We're doing it backwards. Maybe there's more overlap in terms of like what we both love. And so our challenge has been different expressions of that. I think it can be quite suffocating for us if we're both consuming that kind of knowledge and in that realm too much. It's too much. Like, we need the space. Like, I'm going to go over here and pursue that knowledge and like have my own experiences, and he needs to go do that in like with his men and like shamans and in his own masculine expression of it. I think the challenges are when we're too much, we become like one amorphous being, and it's like, oh, I can't see myself through this, and I can't see you, and it's cloudy. And we got a lot out of watching Esther Perel, one of her TED Talks. She's incredible about talking about the concept before of like making your partner be all things. Like, she's like, no, that was what the village was for. You had people that played different roles, and in this culture we live in now, we expect them to be everything. But we really took away from her talk the idea that to have lasting attraction and love requires the space. And it's like this dance of, I'm going to pull myself away so that I can remember who I am as an individual and what lights me up. And also you can see me in my space or my zone of genius and like my full expression. And that's attractive to you, because ultimately that's what attracted us to each other in the first place, of like seeing them in their whole light and wanting that. But when you're so close to each other, it's like, oh, I can't remember. And it's not attractive.
No, I totally get what you mean, because I see Amit, because I saw Amit for the very first time in his music realm. And I know what you talk about, that essence of seeing them in their moment of their power. And like, I'll see him streaming or I'll see him up on stage. And I'm like, oh, like that's, just kind of like really sexy and like draws me in to him. I love him either way, but it's just like, it adds that little bit of like, oh, I see him in his like power and getting out there and doing something that is only part of his identity, not part of us.
Yeah, it's critical. So that's probably, we have taken that on in our relationship. And so, yeah, when times are challenging and we're like, oh, I'm sick about you, I need space. It's like, oh, it's because we haven't consciously like pulled away and done our own things. And so right now Joao is overseas and he's been away for a couple months, struggling to get back, but he's coming home in 2 weeks. And it's like, wow, I'm ready for you to come home, because I've done my thing and now we can
I've had my space.
yeah. And then 2 weeks later I'll be like, okay, off you go. And so it's just a dance. I think rather than getting upset about like, why do I hate you sometimes? It's not that I hate you. It's like, I've forgotten who I am and I can't see the wood for the trees. And just on the Esther Perel thing, she said that pulling away, that separation, creates the desire. So that, yeah, you're so sexy, you're so attractive, and that's what's required in the beginning to spark the interaction. But when you come together, that creates the safety, and which is like such a polarity, right? Like attraction and desire, but also wanting safety and to feel like they're not going to abandon us and we can be our full selves. So she's like, odd that you want both things in a relationship, very different qualities. And so to allow that to play out, you have to have that dance, pulling back and forth, kind of like putty.
That's why we all liked the bad boys out there. Well, I had a stint of the bad boy arena where they just very, very mischievous and providing mixed messages, and you never knew where you stood with them, but it was just so alluring at the time.
All desire, no safety with those bad boys.
Yep. And I think, you know what, that TV show, I'll give them that, Sex Life. I don't know if you watched it, the Netflix series.
Yes.
I feel like they really managed to capture that of like, I think his name was Nick, the bad boy, was able to offer that kind of thrill, whereas the husband was offering the safety and the children, and that kind of dynamic and polarity between the two.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that is such a cultural myth, I think, that's perpetuated, that you have to have one or the other. But and people are repulsed by the idea of the safe guy. But what if you were able to inject moments of more desire into what is already a safe relationship? and spice it up and find that time apart. But I see a lot of women, and I was caught in this too, in the New York trap. I made terrible choices, but the terrible, that is another season.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that's just a whole season of itself.
I wish I could go back and tell my like 28-year-old self, it's not boring to choose a nice guy. You can still have the thrill and the throwdown and the sexual attraction with a nice guy. There are ways. Ugh.
Give yourself a bit of a backhander. I'm right there with your sister.
Well, more to explore next time, but I think we're up for a short, sharp 30-minute time slot.
Yeah.
So should we end it there? Is there any final
I
things you want to add to the
have
combo?
a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Is it pronounced Roosevelt? Yes. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people.
There you are, coming through with the quotes again. And with that, I bid you adieu.
Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend that you think might find it useful. And we'll see you in our next season.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're
season 2.
saying that. Whew. All right. Bye, folks.
Okay.